Now down to Zimbabwe, where the presidential election was relatively calm and peaceful, but allegations of vote rigging from one of the candidates have come swift and loud. Here's Africa 54's Ndimyake Mwakalyelye with more details. Ndimi.
Thank you, Vincent. Well, as the election results from Wednesday's general election trickle in, Zimbabwean Prime Minister and presidential candidate Tsvangirai is calling the presidential vote, quote, a sham election that does not reflect the will of the people. Mr. Tsvangirai Thursday dismissed the election, saying voting irregularities made the ballot a farce. Incumbent President Robert Mugabe is denying the fraud allegations. VOA's Zlatica Hoke has this election recap.
Mr. Mugabe, who turns 90 next February, shows no signs of getting ready to step aside after 33 years in power. The Election Commission said nationwide turnout was high, but it is not clear whether this will benefit the incumbent or his 61-year-old challenger. In a country with a history of election violence, the big question is whether the loser will accept the result. African Union Observer Chief, former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, said initial reports show the elections have been mostly peaceful.
So far from our observers who went out to the field, the conduct of the election everywhere they went had been peaceful, orderly, and free and fair.
Mr. Mugabe has run the Southern African nation since independence from Britain in 1980, first as Prime Minister and since 1987 as President. His subsequent re-elections have been marred by claims of widespread vote rigging and voter intimidation, earning him economic and political sanctions from the United States and the European Union. As a result of the sanctions and years of a mishandled economy, the once prosperous African country fell into chronic poverty, depending on international aid to feed its citizens. The opposition already has listed a series of alleged irregularities, including thousands of voters finding their names missing from the electoral rolls. The United States has questioned the credibility of the election, citing a lack of transparency in its organization and media bias in favor of President Mugabe. A spokeswoman said the sanctions will not be removed until it is determined that the vote was free and fair.
Well, we've made clear to the government of Zimbabwe and the region that further reductions in our sanctions will only occur if this round of elections, these next elections, are credible, transparent, and reflect the will of the Zimbabwean people.
Under international pressure after the disputed election in 2008, Mr. Mugabe formed a power-sharing government with Mr. Tsvangirai, who became Prime Minister. The latest election results are expected by Monday. If the vote receives broad approval and the sanctions are eased, Harare may be able to get international loans for investment needed to rebuild its dilapidated economy. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, joining us now via phone from Harare to discuss this further is Solomon Zwana, Vote's chair for the Zimbabwe Election Support Network, or ZESN. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Zwana.
Oh, thank you.
If you could maybe first of all start off by telling us about the credibility, at least of the election results that have so far been released. Are those official or they're still just speculations?
Yes, I think we want to say that most of it is still speculation because the Zimbabwe Election Commission has not yet announced the final results, and there is already speculation that one political party, in this case ZANU-PF, has won the elections. But what we have been encouraging all players is to wait for the final result. Mm-hmm. But also, whilst we acknowledge that there has been a relative peace and calm, we are concerned that there have been challenges around the elections, flaws that have been reported from various parts of the country, which could actually dent the credibility of the elections.
Now, in fact, Mr. Zwana, Mr. Zwana, your organization actually says that the credibility of these elections is seriously compromised by a systematic effort to disenfranchise about 1 million people. Now, you had about 7,000 observers throughout the country at different constituencies and polling booths. What are you basing this claim on?
Yes, we are blessed because for us, any judgment on the Zimbabwean elections 2013 should be looked at more holistically. We are not just looking at the polling day. We are also looking at processes that date back to the determination of the date, the registration of voters, and also the special vote as well as the postal vote. And so there are a lot of issues that we have to look at before we can judge whether a process has been credible or not. So as far as we are concerned, the issues are broader than that. They are deeper than that. It's more than talking about the absence of violence.
Now, Mr. Zwana, also, your organization at least seems to say that a lot of the disenfranchisement was against urban voters, that their registration was less than that of rural voters. And how does that affect the overall outcome?
Yes, I think we have identified a pattern where the urban voters have been disadvantaged. It started with the voter registration exercise itself, because the demands on the urban voters were more in terms of the documents required, like proof of residence and so forth. It was difficult because some of them did not have those documents. Yet in the rural areas, one only needed to have a letter from his village head to register as a voter. So it was easier for those in the rural areas to do so. And so, and also even the mobile voter registration teams that were moving around, it appears they were more, their movements were more favorable to rural areas than urban.
I see. And what about the point of the voters' roll? This has really been causing a lot of the allegations, at least, of voter rigging. The fact that the electronic version of the voters' roll was not available until maybe a day or 2 days before the election, how does that compromise the outcome?
Yes, as you know, the voters' roll has been a bone of contention even in previous Zimbabwean elections. And we've always highlighted the importance of the voters' roll in our election processes to try to enhance transparency in our electoral system. So, yes, the voters' roll was really late, and as a result, many people were really not able to check their names. I know that the Electoral Commission will argue that people had the opportunity to check for their names on the roll during the registration exercise, but this was limited. And so we heard yesterday people going to polling stations to vote with the voting slips that proved that they'd registered as voters, but their names were not on the roll. And so that created a lot of anxiety. And for us, the voters' roll remains a bone of contention in Zimbabwe electoral system.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Zwana, for your insights and appreciation of the situation. Solomon Zwana is the votes chair for the Zimbabwe Election Support Network, and he joined us via phone from Harare. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, thanks a lot, Ndimi. Now we want to know what you think about Africa 54. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is VOA Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming